So I'm calling this the infinite returns and the demise of the banks because we're going to talk about one of the strategies that's employed by a lot of commercial and sometimes even into my space because we're very, very conservative. We use single family homes, but some of our clients do this. And we've always been advocating that we go to free and clear properties because we want the cash flow and we want to mitigate risk. But when you use the infinite returns, you can make a lot of money, but the timing needs to be exactly perfect. And I have a timing model. I do want to talk about that. And I want to give kudos to Dr. Nenner because Dr. Nenner, I've interviewed him for 15 years or so. He's always told me what is going to happen. I don't want to tell you why because I'm not sure why, but we always know what is happening. A timing model is saying that the real estate market is really getting ready to decline. It's being led by the commercial properties. And this is my attempt to talk about the why. So let's go to my next slide. Let's just start talking about what infinite returns are and why it's a concern to me. So my model has been saying for a while that we're completing the cycle. You know, these cycles just repeat over and over and over again for hundreds of years. We have data back to pre-revolution, and it runs about 18 years. Now, there are signposts as you go along, just confirming where you are on this time continuum. And all those signposts have come in, and it's pretty obvious that we're completing. But it's focused in the commercial space. So let me just talk about what is infinite returns. So an infinite return is where you buy a building. You can do value add where you go in and upgrade the building, maybe kind of like a little distress, buy a little bit below market. You go in and improve the property, put in countertops, new appliances, paint it, clean it, make it look really, really nice. You buy it for 100% and you get a finance. You put 30% down. Now the bank has got 70%. That's the loan to value. They've gone 70%, but the value is now going to change because you've done improvements to the property and the property is now worth more money. So you go in and refinance at 130%, where the bank now has 100% of the risk, and you have all your money out. So everything that you earn past getting all your money out is an infinite return. Now, this works really, really good in an appreciating market, which is most of our market. But when you get into a space like we are in now, where we're starting to complete a cycle, that means that all of the risk has been transferred from the investors who bought the property or managing the property to the bank. Because the investors have all of their money out, they no longer have a vested interest in the property other than profit. So if they can take more profit, that's great. If they don't, they already have their capital out. And who is the one that's taking the risk? Who is taking the risk? The bank is taking the risk on this. So let me go to my next slide. Let's just talk about that. So now we've had an enormous amount of stimulus that came into the market. And we talked about our timing model is showing that we went into the accumulation phase, then the explosive phase. And you can look at this. This is what happened to the banks. They got $2.1 trillion went into the economy in a very, very short time. This basically went into the banks. We put $5 trillion in. A lot of it went into the stock market, but the banks got $2.1 trillion in savings. And of course, they need to put that somewhere. And it peaked in August of 2021. And they were doing crazy things because they want to get that money out and get a return on the money that was in their banks. Naturally, one of the places they want to go to is the commercial real estate. So now what's happened is in March of 2022, you realize that we recognize the fact that the liquidity had changed, that the Federal Reserve said we're not going to stimulate anymore. We're actually going to start slowing it down. And they were removing money at the rate of $100 billion a year, $100 billion a month, actually. So over $1 trillion. So this liquidity was coming back out. At the same time, all the infinite returns were refinancing their properties, getting their capital out, and now all their capital had been retrieved, and they were on infinite returns. So let me go to my next. This is the why. So I want you to understand that, when we look at these timing models, they tell us what is going to happen, and this is our attempt to tell you why it's happening and to explain that this is really happening. So this is a danger for us. So we have this historic loss of liquidity, and liquidity, of course, is the fuel. So there's no more upward push from this liquidity bubble to raise prices. Let me go to my next slide. And here's what's happening. So if you're an astute investor, this is what happened with Blackstone. Now they're defaulting on their Manhattan office building. It was originally valued at $605 million in 2014. Now, in 2014, they probably took out a 10-year loan, took all of their funds out of it, and are now using the building, paying the loan amount, and it gets reappraised in March of 2023 for, obviously, it's going to be refinanced, and it's dropped from $605 million to $175 million. And of course, Blackstone defaults because they're on infinite returns. All of their capital is out. So who is taking the risk here? The bank is taking all the risk. So the investors have all their money, and the bank is taking the risk, and they're going to take it on the chin. Blackstone is defaulting on $308 million, and the property is up for sale for $150 million. So you can see they're going to get skinned for over $150 million if someone paid full price. Now, this is what happens when you have income-producing properties. So when income plummets, which is the other why. So we could see what was going to happen on our timing models. We didn't know why. Well, the why was a lot of people started working at home and were coming into the office. Now, this is very, very bad for the central office, the central business sector, because there's no one coming in. They're not driving in. They're not paying tolls. They're not paying parking. They're not buying lunch or breakfast or dinner. They're not shopping. They're not going out on their lunch break and walking around and buying things. And anyone who's in this central district is having trouble because the people aren't coming there. And there's a vacancy at 19.6% nationally. And that means that 80% of the building is not being used. But here's the kicker on that is a lot of the Fortune 500 companies that have leases in these big buildings are honoring their lease. And when those leases are up, they are going to quit paying, and that vacancy factor will double. So what is the value of a property when there is no income? And of course, now that we have virtually risk-free investments at 4 to 5% in very short-term treasuries, that's going to raise our cap rates. So what happens when the cap rates go up and income plummets? It's a very, very bad, it's a perfect storm, actually. And who's going to be the one that's holding the bag? It's going to be the banks. And this is virtually everywhere because this is a strategy. It's called the infinite return strategy. It's a great strategy. As prices are going up, you just keep taking your money out. It's a great way to make a lot of money. But when things go against you, you have no equity in the property. You have no reason to stay there, and they leave. This just happened at 625 North Michigan on the Magnificent Mile in Chicago, and they gave it back to the bank. So it's nationally. Starwood defaulted on $212 million in his beautiful building in North Atlanta Tower. It's just strictly business for him. It makes, if you think about this, you have no reason to stay. Your capital has been retrieved out of the building. Now, to stay in the property, you're going to take more risk, or you have to put capital back in to get down to the correct loan to value. So it's bad business to do that. And of course, the banks then default and they get the property. Now, we just saw this last week from Cantor Fitzgerald. They're talking about $700 billion in commercial debt set to default. They've gone further, saying that these $3 trillion asset class is now only worth probably $1.8 trillion. So that's about a 40% haircut on this. Now, when you think that it's 30% loan to value on the property, and you have a 40% loss, that means that the investors, all their equity is no longer involved. But they've probably taken it out already, and we're leaving that for the banks. Let me go to my next slide. Now, as I've told you before, these timing models tell us what we should start looking at. This is what Dr. Nenner has told me for years. I know what is going to happen. I don't necessarily know why. So this is why. And these signposts come along virtually all the time. When you get to the end of the cycle, banks start to fail. And of course, right on schedule, we had Credit Suisse, which is a systemically important bank, that failed. Silicon Valley Bank, of course, made the news. Signature Bank, Republic Bank. But what about Bank of America and what about Citibank? Because these guys have a lot of exposure as well. Now, we've been talking about these banks. Most of the commercial real estate and projects are done for a local bank or a regional bank. They're the ones that do most of this. So here's the top 5 that are exposed at the moment. You can take a look at this: Simmons First National, United Community Bank of Georgia, Valley National Bank Corporation out of New Jersey, Bank of the Ozarks, and Cathay General Bancorp. What is not there is New York Community Bank. You can see where that is. It's kind of in the middle of the pack. And of course, New York Bancorp is of course in the news. And what we're talking about here is some of the marketplaces where the sales prices are plummeting. And of course, in San Francisco, we're getting a retracement of 30-40%. And this is a international phenomena, by the way. So this is happening in Germany, it's happening in France, it's happening in China, it's happening in Japan. Of course, in Japan, Japanese banks and Chinese banks are, and of course in China they had Evergrande went bad, and they stuck a lot of the banks with this. So these are enormous losses that the banks are taking. Let me go to my next slide so we can take a look at that. Now you can see that we're getting deposits that are being lost. And look at this. So here, New York Community Bank has been in the news. This looks like they're having their commercial lending loans, commercial real estate bank loans are starting to go bad, and they're under stress. We're seeing lots and lots of deposits leaving. And this is what we got just yesterday with Zero Hedge. You can see how the people are selling out their stock. And what's happening is a lot of the deposits are fleeing as well. And the deposits are leaving the local and regional banks, going to some of the majors. So when your reserves and your deposits go away, this is really, really hard on a bank. So what they've been doing has been going to the Federal Reserve. And we'll talk about that just a second. So I made mention of the fact that we're also seeing this nationally. So Morgan Stanley came out over the weekend and said that they should be selling the German bank. I'm not quite sure how to pronounce this, but they're involved in U.S. Commercial real estate as well. Remember, in Europe, they were down to the negative interest rate bonds, so they had no return. So they went into the U.S. commercial real estate where they got a return on investment, and here they are. The risk is just exponential. It's just going like crazy, and Morgan Stanley has said, "Get out." So here's what's happening: is that we have in the commercial banks over $600 billion in unrealized losses. That is 10 times worse than the great financial crisis. I want you to understand this. I want you to figure this out. Just think this over. So it's 10 times worse than the commercial, than the banks were looking at in the great financial crisis. 10 times, $600 billion in losses. Now you had Cantor Fitzgerald saying they're going to be closer to $900 billion. And that we've had a $1.2 trillion loss. And we have a lot of these commercial properties that have infinite returns that are coming up for refinance. And the investors aren't going to refinance. So who's going to get this? This is going to go to the banks. This is going to be very, very tough on the banks. Now, we just got this over the weekend. Citibank is planning to cut 20,000 U.S. employees. 20,000 U.S. employees. Think of that. And they also own Mexico's Banamex, which is a Citibank product. They're laying off 40,000 people in Mexico. So it's 60,000 jobs that are being caught. Now, these are reasonably good jobs, and they are being lost. Now, the small banks are out of cash. You can just look at this. We just got this from Zero Hedge. And what the banks are doing, they're going to the Federal Reserve. Let me go to the next slide. This is where they're going, the Bank Term Funding Program, and it has exploded. So when these small banks need cash, because when you come to the window and you say, I need some cash, they got to have cash there. And they have to make loans. And when their reserves are being going away to other places, these guys are in deep trouble. This is not contained to one or two. This is contained to a lot of banks. So they've been going to the Federal Bank Term Funding Program, and it has exploded up to $150 billion. The small banks have been borrowing. But look at this. Let me just take you back. It's set to end in March of 2024, in like 4 to 6 weeks. So this is a jeopardy. So what can you do about this? So, you need to take a look at your portfolio and brace for the worst. So take a look. If we can help in any way, let us know. We are proponents of being free and clear. Now, this is going to give us a lot of opportunities going to be coming to us at someone else's. I'm sorry to say, someone else's expense. But we're going to be looking at these. We're going to be looking at many, many properties. So a lot of the banks are getting properties back. In the commercial space, in the multifamily space, there's going to be lots and lots of opportunity. And when the banks start losing all the reserves, that means that they can't continue funding. So you have to remember, a lot of the builders are out on funding as well. So once that funding gets cut off, we're going to have opportunities in the builders. So if we can help in any way, give me a call. My best. Bye-bye now.